we got in a couple of the motors and inverter packages, and that's a couple of things that were holding us up in our quest to get these two vehicles done. We're still missing a lot of components. We're missing chargers, DC to DC converters. Well, no, I think I've got the DC to DC converters for these two vehicles, but that's an item that we're missing for other projects. And of course, the chargers we're still missing. Battery boxes, hopefully tomorrow for these two projects. And we're still waiting on the lightened flywheels. So anyway, I pulled the component board out that's just been stashed in the engine bay there. Got it on the workbench. We got the Curtis 840 display in. If you remember before, there's a hole there. We got the hole drilled for the menu switch, which will go right there below and between the two gauges. And so that's what we're going to be doing now. We're going to add the menu switch, wire it. We're going to do the component board, and then we can install it, because now we have the components that we've been waiting for. We were waiting for the inverter and for the main contactor and the display, the menu switch, wiring harness. Those things all come with that motor inverter package, and we had been waiting some time for those things. So now that we have them, we can make some progress, and all these things can go in and be wired. And with the VW, there's no problem because the motor comes in from below and all this stuff is above, and there won't be any issue. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm not going to bore you with the little nitty-gritty. I'll come back when I have some progress to show you, but got my mark right here where the throttle cable will come, and we'll make our little pulley right here. We will mount the throttle, decide exactly where these two components will go. The holes are already drilled for the inverter. So of course our little side panels, which we showed in a previous video, those have already been cut and so forth, and these are the bolts that will hold them in place, tapped and threaded. Like I said, I believe we showed you that previously. So we were just waiting on a few of these items to start making progress. So this is a big one, having the wiring harness. We can now run the wire front to rear. We'll run the other 12-volt control wire front to rear, the controller harness, and as soon as we get the battery boxes mounted in place, then we can run the cabling too, and so all the wiring will be done at that point. So yeah, it's time to start making progress on these two projects. So we're going to show them to you separately. So we'll show you the thing, since that's the one we started with, and then we'll show you the progress on the 61 Beetle. And again, we've already done a few things on both vehicles. We did the instrumentation, the glove box for the Beetle, and we did the wiring behind the dash. That part's done. We drained the fuel tank, still in the vehicle. So there's a lot more to be done on the Bug here. But just so that we're not tripping over things, we're waiting on parts. So by not doing removing the fuel tank and the engine, the other things. It's just, we don't have that stuff laying around. And it's not, like I said, it's not going to affect the overall time of this thing leaving. So we're going to continue marching forward. Like I said, the thing's going to be the next one to really start seeing. Component board, it's in the vise upside down. So this is the bottom, this is the top. And so this will be the side that we have our coolant reservoir on the side panel, as you see in our VW Beetle and Thing conversions. They have that in common. On this side, the sideboard will have the relays and terminal strips on. So we've got the inverter with the chill plate mounted. We've got our throttle mounted. We've got our pulley that we use. Got the wiring. We've got our shunt. And we have our main contactor. So these holes right here, this is where this will mount in the vehicle. And these are the side panel mounts. So what we're doing now is I've laid out the side panel, and so I've punched all my holes, and now I'm going to drill them. And I don't know if you can see that in camera or not, but anyway, measured where I want my holes, and we'll drill those things and then mount those items. So we're going to have 2 terminal strips. There's 3 relays, our KSI relay, our reverse lights relay, and the reverse relay. And then we have the fuse for the KSI input. So that's what's going to go on this sideboard. And it's going to go on this side. And the terminal strips will be on the bottom. The relays and the fuse will be on top. I'm out of the screen. I'm sorry about that. It's going to go here. So terminal strips, relays, fuse. And these things then will be pre-wired to one of the terminal strips. That way, this goes in the vehicle, then this is installed once the main component board's in the vehicle. The wires are run through holes, connected to our terminal strips, and then from there it's connected to the vehicle. And so we'll also have some of the wiring from the controller harness will go to these terminal strips, and some of it's going to go up to the front of the vehicle. So this just allows easy mounting locations. In the future, if you ever want to remove any of these things, you just undo what you need to do. If you want to remove the whole board, which we've done, where we've upgraded from DC to AC, for instance, we can just remove that side panel altogether, remove this, so this stays with the vehicle. This part can be removed, a new one put in, bang, bang. I mean, makes for a very quick upgrade or change, modification, whatever the case may be. And for any testing, boy, it's so much easier to have these access points where I can check, a relay. I can check to see that I have voltage, coming out of that relay, activating that relay, going to the relay, or whatever the case may be. It's easier to check that we have all the inputs and outputs going to the inverter. If I don't have to, interrupt that line somewhere, everything comes to a terminal strip somewhere. And so it just makes for very easy testing and inspection. So I'll be drilling the holes on this plate next, and then mounting these few items, and then we'll mount it on the board and wire it up on there, and then disconnect those few wires. There's only what is there, 7 wires that will be connected. 3 from the throttle, 2 from the shunt, and 2 from the main contactor. And then, like I said, then we'll install this in the vehicle. Well, the side panel's installed. Like I mentioned before, everything's upside down from the way it will be in the vehicle. So the components are mounted, the holes for wire access are drilled. Now to do the part that I enjoy the most. Oh, I enjoy all of this, to be honest with you. But I do like the wiring. So that's what I'll be doing next. Just simply wiring from the components to the terminal strips, and I will wire everything that I can pre-wire, now, and then install it in the vehicle. Here's the component board with the wiring that we can do prior to installing it in the vehicle. So right here we have the connections for the main contactor. They'll go here and here. Then we have our shunt connections, and they'll be the next 2. And then we have our throttle connections. They're the next 3. And that takes care of this terminal strip. This is ground. And then this terminal strip is all the things that are mounted that are going to this board. So these will be all external connections to the vehicle or to the controller. So what we have here is we have this will be the KSI signal. So this will be the blue wire that goes to the wiring harness for the controller. And then this is the positive to the KSI relay, which is here. So it'll be the red one here. So that goes to there, but the incoming side, like I said, this will be going to the controller wiring harness. This is going to be coming from our ignition and our safety circuits, like the safety interlock and our inertia switch, low voltage cutout, everything. Those will be in series, and if everything's as it should be, then we would get our 12-volt signal here, which would activate our KSI relay. This next one right here is the 12-volt control. This comes from the inverter. It's a 12-volt signal coming from the controller. And it's also a line's going to attach here that's going to go forward. It goes to the menu switch, so forth. And also from here, what's pre-wired is it goes down to our reversing relay. And so it's the common on the relay. And then the normally closed will be our forward, normally open will be reverse. Next one down is going to be ignition switch. 12 volts will come here, and so that's going to come on one side from the vehicle. The other side will go to things such as our cooling system pump and fans. This one is our traction pack positive, and so that's what is used for our KSI input. So we're going to actually come from here, which would be our traction pack positive, and it's going to go to here, and then from here it goes to the common side of our relay. And then this is going to be unswitched to 12 volts. And one side of this unswitched 12 volts is going to go down here to our reverse lights common, and the reverse light relay. And then we have goes to our reverse relay coils, so the reversing relay and the reverse lights relay. And so this side again goes to the vehicle side. This is going to be coming from our reverse switch in the dash. So when we activate the reverse switch, it's going to activate these two relays. One's going to put the vehicle in reverse electronically, and the other's going to turn on the reverse lights. And then this right here is where we go from here to connect to the reverse lights. So you've got your external connections, your board connections here, again external connections, and then these are going to be, we'll just slide these out, disconnect this board for installation. But again, like I've mentioned so many times, just allows the modularity that I like and an easy way to test and inspect. So next, I'll just pull these wires out, which you can see how easy that is. And then we'll disconnect the side board, and then we'll go install the component board in the vehicle. Now all we have to do is attach the side panels. So our coolant reservoir will go on that side, and our relay board will go on the driver's side. You can see where the throttle comes through. So it's really quite quick and easy if you pick the right method. And with this method, we have a common mounting board and a heat sink for all these components. Yeah, this has a chill plate, but you'd be surprised how warm the contactors get. I mean, they get hot, and this just helps keep everything cooler. Plus, we don't have a direct connection to the motor that allows heat to transfer to our inverter. Instead, it's mounted on an additional heat sink that's spaced so there's air on both sides, allows us to channel wiring back there. Just a easy mounting. You saw 4 bolts allow this thing to be mounted in place. Here's the side panel on our component board installed, wires connected. We'll be putting in the coolant reservoir much later in the process, because we will be running some wires in this area. And so we still need to connect all of the external wiring to this. So we've got our 12 volts switched and unswitched. We've got a line that goes to the reverse lights, and then the controller harness wiring. And we'll temporarily connect it and run the wiring that's coming up. We will disconnect that when we're finished and leave it up out of the way so that we don't bump it when we're installing the motor. Typically we would put the motor in first, but that's not always the case when you're waiting on things like waiting on the machine shop to get the light and flywheels to you. So we're continuing to do what we can do. Hopefully be able to pick up the battery boxes the first of this next week, and we can start mounting those and then run our cabling. Of course, things like connecting the throttle, installing our secondary return spring. We can run the cabling, from the shunt and the main contactor to the controller. There's lots of things that we can still do, and that's what we're going to be doing while we're waiting on some of these components. We're still waiting on the charger, and so we'll do what we can while we can, and that's just the way, you know, a project goes. So you got to be flexible. You got to be thinking, what can I do while I'm waiting? You just have to remember there are certain things that are sequential, and you don't want to get ahead of yourself and have to undo things. That's one of the advantages of having had one of our workshops, is you understand the big picture, and you're less likely to make some of those errors and have to redo things. I segregated out the wires that we're going to use in this conversion, and the ones that aren't going to be used we trimmed. And so we didn't trim them too short. If anyone ever wanted to use it for whatever reason, they're there. And the ones that had a connector that we're not using, we just disconnected at the connector. So these are the wires that we'll be using. And of course this is the display, and we're going to run that separately. Just because it has a larger connector on it, we don't want it to get tangled when we pull the rest of these. Okay, and not all of these are going to be going front to rear. So the next step is that I'm going to take and segregate out those that will run from the rear to the front, and I'll pull those. And let me show you what I'm doing. So I'm going to run the wire down what originally was the heater channels, and it's going to go on both sides. One side will be the cabling for the batteries. Double aught cable will run on one side, and on the other side I've got everything else. And I'm using some nylon rope. This is actually, I've mentioned before, I don't throw a lot away. This is a ski rope from 40 years ago. I like the nylon rope because you can just push it and open it up, and you can put something in it, and when you pull it, it snugs down tight against it. So this is our 4 conductor cable that we're running. Like I said, it's going to have the KSI signal, going to have the reverse switch, or reverse switch to relay, and then the others we'll just put next to it here, and I'll tape over those in this little tail right there, and we'll pull them all together. And they're going to go through all of our tubing. You see under the back seat here, kind of zoom in on the other side right here. Right there, you can see it comes through the bulkhead there, makes a bend, makes a 90, makes another 45, and then goes down one side of the tunnel. Same on the other side here. So it's going to come out right here, and then we'll finish channeling it up through here. It'll come up and end up. So basically have my rope here, and I will pull all that at one time, one pull. I've also got the other channel already threaded, so when I used my fish tape, I just ran it down both sides and connected my rope to it, so now the rope goes down both channels. Will make things quick and easy. Just a little view of the process here. We are wiring the harness, and so we're just doing the rough wiring right now. So it's 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 going to be loomed later on. Right now we just got it routed, so you can see it goes up and above and across, and then some of it's going to go onto this side over here. It's the KSI, and what else is going on that side? Oh, the controller 12 volts will go here. Up here we have forward and reverse coming through. We've got our main contactor control wiring coming through, and we have the throttle wiring right here. So that will finish off the connections in the back here. And so going forward, like we showed you before, we have the menu switch, the economy mode, and the 12 volt control, as well as the wiring for the Curtis 840 display all goes forward. And so that's going to finish the 12 volt control. So we'll get these things hooked up. We'll test the things that we can test, like we'll check and make sure the reverse lights are working, that the relays are being activated, that kind of thing. Then as soon as the battery boxes are installed, we'll start running the traction pack cabling. But I just thought I'd show you, how we've got it all run. We've got it pulled, kind of laid out, and we'll just do, section at a time. Cut, strip, crimp, screw into place. Well, here's the wires connected. So we're basically complete. So only wiring left to do will be the traction pack wiring. And so we'll have a couple lines come in, one from the negative, most negative of our traction pack, and then the most positive of the traction pack will come into our main contactor coming from the main disconnect up front. And that of course will go to the positive on the controller, and this shunt will go to the negative on the controller. And we're going to have one other line go from the shunt that goes up front, and that's our negative up front. So we're pulling our most negative off front. That will go up for the DC to DC converter and the charger, and of course the positive is already up there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to hook up the 12 volt battery, and we're going to test the systems that we can check and make sure that our KSI relay is working, our reverse relay and our reverse lights relay. We checked earlier, we had to reconnect the power for the reverse lights. The reverse lights on these gets its 12 volts from the coil. There's a line comes in the coil, and then some other things go off of the coil, and that reverse lights is one of them. Goes from the ignition coil to the switch on the transaxle and then to the lights. So we had to hook that up to power. That's one of the things that's hooked up to that switched 12 volts. Well, with the battery connected, let's turn on the ignition. We turn on the ignition, our little green indicator light comes on, the 12 volt gauge comes alive. Gonna have to charge that battery. It looks like it's getting a little bit low because we're just above 12 volts. And so the light for the 12 volts comes on. And let's see if we have reverse lights. Indeed we do. We have reverse lights. So that tells me that that portion of it's working. Let me go get my little test light, and we'll check to make sure that the reverse relay is working also. Well, this is our reverse relay right here. And I turned off the light while I went and got this so that we wouldn't be draining that battery. So let me turn the reverse lights back on. Back into reverse. See if we have power to our reverse relay. And we do. So get my hand out of the way so you can see it. So we do. So we also want to make sure that the relay is on here. So we'll go to the positive side of the KSI relay. No power. That's because one of our safeties isn't set up. So we don't have enough voltage going through the JLD 404. So I'm going to have to reprogram that, and I'll be back. With the JLD 404 set to where it's not open because of the low voltage, we can now see that we have 12 volts going to our KSI relay. So that looks like everything's working. We got ignition, we got our 12 volts always on. All those things we know that we should have are working. And these are all stuff to the controller. So we now have our shunt wired, we have the throttle wired, we have our main contactor wired, we have our reverse lights and electronic reverse all wired. Our KSI is wired. We're done except for the traction pack. So get those battery boxes finished and we'll have our traction pack wiring in no time.